Okay, got a couple more chapters to go on Solomon. When the queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon and his relation to the name of the Lord, she came up to test him with hard questions. Now, this is a lady from a southern nation on the coast of, on the tip of the Arabian Peninsula. So when Solomon and Hiram established their trade routes to the south of Israel, they're now coming into competition with this lady. So that's why she is going up here to deal with Solomon, because now she knows about this guy who has opened up his own shipping lanes in this area, and she wants to know about this dude. Arriving at Jerusalem with a very great caravan, with camels carrying spices, large quantities of gold and precious stones, she came to Solomon and talked with him about all that she had on her mind. And I think we can be very safe in assuming that part of what's on her mind is to establish a treaty and a pact with Solomon. And now that he's got his shipping lanes down passing past her country, she's got a competing interest with him in this area, so she wants to deal with that too. I'm sure that's on her mind, as well as some other things. Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. And I don't know what her questions were. They would have been some sort of logic puzzles or tricky things. Some sort of, matching wit against wit sort of thing. When the queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon and the palace he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his officials, the attending servants in their robes, his cupbearers, and the burnt offerings he made in the temple of the Lord, she was overwhelmed. She said to the king, "The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true. But I did not believe these things until I came and saw them with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told me. In wisdom and wealth you have far exceeded the report I heard. How happy your men must be." That may be true, but there is an undercurrent of discontent happening in the population, which the queen probably didn't see during her visit. "How happy your officials who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. Praise, so the upper class is content. Maybe not the lower class, but the upper class certainly is. Praise be to the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and placed you on the throne of Israel. Because of the Lord's eternal love for Israel, he has made you king to maintain justice and righteousness." Now, when foreign leaders talk like this, that doesn't mean that they actually believe in or are going to be faithful to this God. Not at all. That just means they acknowledge that Israel's God has done great things for Israel. It doesn't mean the Queen of Sheba is going to suddenly start worshiping Israel's God. It just means that she acknowledges Israel's God has done great things for Israel. "And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, large quantities of spices and precious stones. Never again were so many spices brought in as those the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Hiram's ships brought gold from Ophir, and from there they brought great cargoes of almug wood and precious stones. The king used the almug wood to make supports for the temple of the Lord and for the royal palace, and to make harps and lyres for the musicians. So much almug wood has never been imported or seen since that day." Israel will never again reach these heights. This is as high as it's ever going to go for this kingdom and this country. King Solomon gave the Queen of Sheba all she desired and asked for, and I'm assuming that part of that was some sort of trade deal going on between them, besides what he had given her out of his royal bounty. So she gave him a bunch of stuff, and he gave her a bunch of stuff too. Then she left and returned with her retinue to her own country. Second Chronicles 9. When the Queen of Sheba heard of Solomon's fame, she came to Jerusalem to test him with hard questions. Arriving with a very great caravan, with camels carrying spices, large quantities of gold, and precious stones, she came to Solomon and talked with him about all that she had on her mind. Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too hard for him to explain to her. Would we call this mansplaining today? I think this is an outdated, archaic, sexist passage, huh? When the queen of Sheba saw the wisdom of Solomon, as well as the palace he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his officials, the attending servants in their robes, the cupbearers in their robes, and the burnt offerings he made in the temple of the Lord, she was overwhelmed. She said to the king, "The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true. But I did not believe what they said until I came and saw them with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half the greatness of your wisdom was told me. You have far exceeded the report I heard. How happy your men must be. How happy your officials, who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. Praise be to the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and placed you on his throne as king to rule for the Lord your God. Because of the love of the Lord your God for Israel, and his desire to uphold them forever, he has made you king over them, to maintain justice and righteousness." Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold, large quantities of spices and precious stones. There had never been such spices as those the queen of Sheba gave the king Solomon. The men of Hiram and the men of Solomon brought gold from Ophir. They also brought algum wood and precious stones. The king used the algum wood to make steps for the temple of the Lord and for the royal palace, and to make harps and lyres for the musicians. Nothing like them had ever been seen in Judah. King Solomon gave the queen of Sheba all she desired and asked for. He gave her more than she had brought to him. We read about what she brought to him in the king's passage. And he ends up giving her more. We don't get an account of that, but he ends up giving her even more. Then she left and returned with her retinue to her own country. The weight of the gold that Solomon received yearly was 666 talents, not including the revenues from merchants and traders and from all the Arabian kings and the governors of the land. That'd be in that area south and east of Israel, kind of where the Queen of Sheba came from, that area, the Arabian Peninsula. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 600 becquerels of gold went into each shield. He also made 300 small shields of hammered gold with 3 minas of gold. I don't know what these. I mean, you have the footnote. You have. I mean, it says here, 7.5 pounds, 3 3/4 pounds. The king put them in the palace of the forest of Lebanon. Remember how they had that wooden palace made entirely out of wood from the forest of Lebanon, the trees of Lebanon? That we just call it the palace of the forest of Lebanon. He's putting them up for display in that hall. These are not meant for battle. You don't bring gold shields out meant for battle. These are purely decorative. Then the king made a great throne inlaid with ivory and overlaid with fine gold. The throne had 6 steps, and on its back had a rounded top. On both sides of the seat were armrests, with a lion standing beside each of them. Lions, of course, were symbols of strength all throughout this region of the world. 12 lions stood on the 6 steps, one on either end of each step. Nothing like it had ever been made for any other kingdom. This is a one-of-a-kind style throne. All King Solomon's goblets were gold, and all the household articles in the palace of the forest of Lebanon, there's that wooden palace again, were pure gold. Now this apparently was a public place. This forest of Lebanon palace apparently was where people came to have their cases heard or whatever. So when they came in, they would have been impressed with all this fine stuff everywhere. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's day. The king had a fleet of trading ships at sea, along with the ships of Hiram, his buddy from Tyre. Once every 3 years it returned, carrying gold, silver, and ivory, and apes and baboons, so even exotic animals were imported. The king's got his own private zoo. King Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. The whole world sought audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom God had put in his heart. Year after year, everyone who came brought a gift, articles of silver and gold, robes, weapons, and spices, and horses and mules. King Solomon accumulated chariots and horses. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horses, which he kept in the chariot cities and also with him in Jerusalem. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar as plentiful as sycamore fig trees in the foothills. Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt and from Cuwe. I don't know how you pronounce that. Q. The royal merchants purchased them from Q. They imported a chariot from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver and a horse for 150 shekels of silver. They also exported them to the kings of the Hittites and of the Arameans. The Hittites were north of Israel. The Arameans, they're basically in Turkey. We would call that Turkey today. The Arameans were what we would now call Syria, just north of Israel. He wasn't supposed to do this, by the way. We're seeing the warning signs. King Solomon is becoming a lover of the world instead of a lover of God. Deuteronomy 17, verse 14. Moses is saying to the people, when you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, and you have taken possession of it and settled in it, and you say, which Moses knew they would, let's set a king over us like all the nations around us. Be sure to appoint over you the king the Lord your God chooses. Which they did do that. They did do that. He must be from among your own brothers. Saul, David, and Solomon were all chosen by God himself. So they did do that. Do not place a foreigner over you, or one who is not a brother Israelite. They didn't do that. The king, moreover, here's the key part, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself, or make the people return to Egypt to get more of them. That doesn't mean return to Egypt to live. It means return to Egypt to get stuff, to get horses, to get goods. For the Lord has told you are not to go back that way again. He must not take many wives, which of course Solomon will do, or his heart be led astray, which Solomon's heart will be. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. So everything that we've been reading about Solomon doing in these last few passages is directly against what the king of Israel was supposed to do. 2 Chronicles 9, starting in verse 13. The weight of the gold that Solomon received yearly was 666 talents, not including the revenues brought in by merchants and traders. Also, all the kings of Arabia and the governors of the land brought gold and silver to Solomon. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 600 bekas of hammered gold went into each shield. He also made 300 small shields of hammered gold, but those with 300 bekas of gold in each shield. The king put them in the palace of the forest of Lebanon. Then the king made a great throne inlaid with ivory and overlaid with pure gold. The throne had 6 steps, and a footstool of gold was attached to it. On both sides of the seat were armrests, the lions standing beside each of them. 12 lions. These are obviously carved. These aren't real lions. These are sculpted lions, in case you're wondering. 12 lions stood on the 6 steps, one on either end of each step. Nothing like it had ever been seen for any other kingdom. All King Solomon's gods. Now that doesn't mean that there were no other thrones that had lions in them. Lions were an extremely common motif throughout this region. Every king wanted to be seen as a lion tamer. I mean, lions were, wandered this area back in those days. They're now in Africa, I think, almost exclusively, but they wanted this area back in those days. And every king wanted to demonstrate his strength by being seen as a lion tamer or a lion killer, a lion hunter. So lion imagery was extremely common in the nations around Israel. So that it doesn't mean this was the only throne that was ever made that had lions in it. Okay, this just means this was a one-of-a-kind, unique kind of throne, especially by Israel standards. All King Solomon's goblets were gold, and all the household articles in the palace of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's day. The king had a fleet of trading ships manned by Hiram's men. Once every 3 years it returned, carrying gold, silver, and ivory, and apes and baboons. King Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. He was the top dog at this time. All the kings of the earth sought audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom God had put in his heart. Year after year, anyone who came brought a gift, articles of silver and gold, and robes, weapons, and spices, and horses and mules. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, and 12,000 horses, which he kept in the chariot cities, and also with him in Jerusalem. He ruled over all the kings from the river, that's the Euphrates River, to the land of the Philistines, that's in the southern coast of Israel on the Mediterranean side, as far as the border of Egypt. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones. By the way, that's the entire scope of the Promised Land. So Solomon reigns as king of Israel over all the land that Israel was supposed to have. God has fulfilled his promise to Israel to give them the land. The king made silver as common in Israel. By the way, and what that means is, the reason why I point that out is because it is not still an outstanding promise of God to give them all the land. Some people will tell you that the Israelites never claimed all the land, so God still has to fulfill that promise to them, but that's not accurate. God did fulfill the promise to them to give them the entire land. That is not still something that he needs to do to them today or in the future. That promise was fulfilled in the past and does not still need to be fulfilled today or in the future. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar as plentiful as sycamore fig trees in the foothills. Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt and from all other countries. But the problem with all this is that this wealth is not spreading down to the people. Solomon is hoarding it for himself. So it's not going to take very long after his death that people are going to want to take it back. Okay? You're not going to get all this gold and all this wonderful stuff accumulated in one place by one person without somebody eventually making an effort to get it back. And that's going to happen practically as soon as Solomon dies.